Thank you so much. An entrepreneur at heart, meaning I'm still making it up every single day. One day I will figure it out. It could be a few days out. How's everybody doing? Good. Who here would feel confident following that act? Not an act, by the way. He was amazing. Oh my gosh, warm and smart and direct and witty. That was incredible. This will, not to disappoint, this will not be that good, but it'll be pretty good because I got Joey and Brett. First of all, I actually think this is a really interesting topic. If you have been an entrepreneur, you've been in business, and you've started to think about how could I take my brand, my product, my service outside of the U.S., it's a fascinating topic. And my experience has been that it's actually a lot different than you think. We're all sort of, we're motivated as we see this massive globe of countries and markets, and we see revenue, and it's so appealing, it's so enticing. I will tell you, having done it for nearly 20 years now, it is, if done right, it's a huge opportunity. But it is laden with risks, and we don't have enough time for me to share all of the mistakes that I've made, but I have learned some things. And I know you both have as well. So I'm looking forward to this conversation. Before I go further, I just want a quick plug for WTC Utah. And I'm on the board. I have been for about 18 months. And I say that because for many, many years, I didn't know exactly how to navigate some of the complexities of international markets. I joined the WTC Utah board, and I understand that organization better. I actually joined a trade mission to Mexico, literally last fall. And I will tell you, it was the most productive 5 days I have spent outside of the country from a business perspective in my life. And so hundreds of conversations, lots of follow-ups. I thought that with 60 people in Asia and in sourcing in different countries that we knew what we were doing, and it was an incredible experience. So if you are contemplating going international or sourcing internationally, it's a tremendous resource. Highly recommend it. That's what I get paid to do. So the commercial is over. They don't pay for board members. Brett, great to have you here. Both Brett and Joey flew in for this. Brett, you've got a fascinating background. You joined Priceline as a much younger person, about 25 years ago.
Yeah, 25 this year.
A startup. You've seen a lot. I mean, it's sort of interesting to think about what you would have gone through in travel. Actually, not even traveled back to the internet bubble. I mean, you're super hot when you joined in '99. Then the bubble burst. 9/11, the Great Recession, COVID, all of these things that had so much impact on a business like that. I'm glad you survived it.
I'm just lucky to be able to walk up this stage.
Oh my gosh.
The knees barely work.
What a journey. Brett's joined early, has his fingerprints on that business, and has been the CEO since 2015, I believe. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Super cool. Good to have you here. Joey. So I met Joey moderating a panel many years ago, the Silicon Slopes, and we became fast friends. Joey, co-founder of Allbirds, led it for many years until a couple of months ago, still sits on the board. And there were a couple of things that really struck me about Joey when I first met him. The first was this guy has an incredible vision. I mean, this was probably 5 or 6 years ago, and boy, a lot happens as a brand grows. But the other thing that I really admired was how you thought about sustainability and doing good in this world in a business context. And you spent a number of years of your career thinking about that. And a mantra, and I don't know if this is yours or Allbirds, but I really love it. To create better things in a better way, emphasizing simplicity in design and confidence and comfort. I love the juxtaposition of better things, comfort, everything that a consumer would value, but this notion of a better way. Thank you for building a great brand. Thank you for leading the way.
Thank you for bringing that up.
That's awesome. So thanks for being here. So let's jump into a conversation. As I said early on, it's so easy when you're looking at non-U.S. markets to just see all of the upside. They're big markets. There's so much scale. There's so many reasons to go after them. But what you realize when you've spent time in them is that every market is so different, and the nuances really, really matter. We can't think about, if we look at international markets through our lens and we try and drop a product or a service the same way that we have in the U.S., it's challenging. How did you think about selecting international markets, really understanding just what are the things that are attractive and what are the things that are potential pitfalls as you expand?
You're looking at me, so this is for me.
This is for you, Joey.
Okay. Well, first of all, thanks for the great intro, and thank you for hosting me here. Silicon Slopes is also awesome. The events that you guys do here in Salt Lake City, for some reason, and I've been to one in Park City that I've come to a number of times. They're phenomenal here. You guys you got it going on. Great content, great people. I will say I usually find it a little more collaborative. I'm sitting on a stage where I reverse seared a piece of meat the night before I came to Utah.
I also love this about you.
With Traeger pellets and Traeger rub. I went out of my way to book my flight on Priceline, and these guys show up in these ridiculous-looking shoes. And
oh no!
And
oh.
Usually I find it collaborative. But
stay here. I'll be right back.
I see what we're doing here. This is going to be a little more combative up here.
Freaking blew it.
Which is fine.
Box of pellets is on the way to your house.
So I started Allbirds with a partner named Tim Brown, who was more on the design side. We started in 2015 together. We launched our first product. It was called the Wool Runner in 2016. And I came at it because I wanted to really prove that you could create a business that aligned the business model between the impact it was making and the financials it was producing. What I mean by that is our R&D model was finding the best of naturally derived innovations, putting them into consumer products because they made a much better consumer experience. We were targeting making the best looking, a unique aesthetic, and bringing the most comfortable shoes we possibly could make because of those natural materials. That drives growth, it manages our cost, a whole bunch of things. And that was the purpose for me coming. I actually didn't care about shoes at all when I started the business. I happen to have now become a little bit more focused on that. It became a global business very quickly. You can't make shoes in America for the most part. It's virtually impossible. Every pair of shoes is, people like to call their shoes, maybe you call those handmade, but all shoes are handmade, like 150 hands, and it is a wild and demystifying experience to learn about the lack of automation in that manufacturing process. So my first real introduction was predominantly on the sourcing side. We did launch in 2016 with a website in New Zealand and America at the same time on the same day. My partner's a Kiwi. The Wool Runner was merino wool from New Zealand, so we wanted to pay homage to the heritage of the company. But since then, we've probably sold about $1.5 billion worth of shoes in 8 years now, and about a quarter of that probably is in international markets. And Not all of that is quality revenue, unfortunately. And I think the way you teed that up was really beautifully done because, naturally as an optimistic entrepreneur, you see upside and it seems easy and you simplify the problems and you tell super smart people, like, we can do this, let's go get it done. And sometimes it works great, sometimes it doesn't. A lot of lessons on the way. I would say market selection, like there are some like quite obvious things about, what are the macros in the market? What's the general consumption pattern of the consumer and how does that relate to what you've experienced in your home market, the US in our case. But I would say the thing that I've learned the most is cultural distance is a real thing. Like cultural distance between the people in that foreign country and in your home market. If it's a long distance, it's gonna be hard to get the marketing right and to really resonate, even if the product is a good product for that market. Like localizing that is very hard, and I think that cultural distance is a very important thing to consider. The second thing I would say is, what does it do to your business to go internationally? And I have significantly underestimated the contortions that we've had to do inside of the business, as well as the administrative cost of being in international markets. Some of them are incredibly challenging, what you have to put in given government mandates and regulation in terms of foreign direct investment and foreign businesses coming in. And so I would say probably my biggest regret is not appreciating the capabilities that we needed to build and in order to appropriately service some of those markets. And some are a lot easier than others. And just as an example, the macros in the UK aren't fantastic. Like I'm not like I'm not very positive on the British economy going forward. But we thought it was a culturally close market. London's a really important market strategically to influence the Middle East and other markets globally in terms of the fashion marketplace. So we thought it was really important. And it was actually, reasonably easy to get in there. So it made sense from that perspective. China, on the other hand, completely new tech stack. We had to put an enormous team on the ground to make it work. Different quality standards with different labeling. We got wildly different requirements from the marketing side. And worst of all, we had to change the product cycle in order to meet the consumer demand in that market in an appropriate fashion with the appropriate cadence. So I think those are like the probably the two biggest things that I've taken away. And if I was able to rewind, I would have done a number of markets significantly differently and entered them with partners instead of gone alone or maybe not entered at all for quite a long ways, because you can always get more revenue, and leaving growth on the table is such a fantastic thing to do as you're building a business, because you always want more opportunities to grow. Once you've done them, and particularly if you've done them poorly, it's hard to fix it. So those are some of the lessons I've learned, but.
It's great. It's great perspective. Some learnings, but you also learn that every market is different. Yeah. If are there patterns that you saw? Would you have not chosen some of those markets? If you were going to new markets, what are the things that allow you to recognize each market differently and not make some of those mistakes?
I think the cultural distance is one of the most important things, but that doesn't mean you don't change it. So just as an example, like we when we talk about sustainability, that's not our core value proposition for a consumer. We make the best shoes on the planet, and then we happen with a free gift with purchase, this amazing fact that everything is the most sustainable shoe that has ever existed and will continue to be, and we'll continue to innovate that. But when we talk about that in Europe, we got to focus on plastics. That's the big thing about sustainability in Europe. When you talk about it in Asia, frankly, you can't talk about any of that unless you're, say, recycling, which is like a very early stage of evolution in terms of growing a focus on climate change and sustainability. So we really shifted the message to natural material innovation for benefits of the consumer. And those differences are quite stark, and they require, like, typically we went in and said we're going to do 80% global marketing, 20% local. That's our local model. And in China, it's not that at all. It's like 60% local marketing, at least, maybe even more, which is an incredibly high burden that you just don't get the leverage on the kind of global investment on the marketing side that you would hope to get if you're going to successfully enter a market and make a lot of money. So that's really hard, and same thing I mentioned on the product side, like that. They want newness all the friggin' time. Every week you got to have something new in China, and the consumers are not like that here in Europe. So the demand on the business and the core infrastructure is essential to take in mind, and that would dictate. I might have gone into China at the same time that we went into, but I might have gone in with a partner out of the gates instead of doing a direct model first and then adding it. And frankly, China's been a pretty successful one for us, but still tons of lessons on the way.
Love it. Super interesting. Thank you. Brett, you guys are Priceline's in 200 or so countries around the world. Talk a little bit about the process of going from startup to 200 countries. How did you select them? What did you learn along the way? And then as you now step back and think about that geographic breadth, how do you prioritize investments across that many geographies?
All right. So first of all, I'm from Connecticut, okay? And we believe in no conflicts of interest in the company I work for. I don't own a Traeger. I don't own Allbirds. And I'm not on the board of the World Trade Center, and I don't have an account with Science Bank. So everything I say,
this is
you
real.
Can trust. You can trust me. This is the real deal.
It's a Traeger in the mail. Come on.
But I was expecting like a nice goodie bag up in my hotel room with a big Traeger in, some new Allbirds shoes, nothing. So this could be my last trip to Utah.
Joey, we got this. Let's not disappoint.
Okay, now that that's out of the way. Let's take a little ride back to 1997 when Priceline was founded. We launched the business in 98 and then a year later went public. At that time, there was 2 other travel companies on the planet that sold travel online. One was Expedia and one was Travelocity, and they launched at about the same time that we did. So this is literally anywhere in the world. No one was selling anything online related to travel other than our 3 companies. And we, in the first year of business from going public to the following year, our stock price went from about $16 a share to about $950 a share within a year. We were the deal. Like you couldn't turn on your radio and not hear a Priceline ad. In the second year, you couldn't turn on your TV and not see William Shatner, selling and upselling our Name Your Own Price product. It was a very exciting time. It was definitely, you felt like you were invincible, like we had the greatest products and services in the world. And so we said, well, we've got to take this overseas, right? This just can't just be an American thing. This has got to be everywhere in the world. And our founder had a great vision for our products and services. So he says, okay, the first market we're going to go to is we're going to go to Europe, and we're going to take it to the UK. And so he sent a team from our shop in Priceline over to Europe to live there and start the business. And they basically replicated the exact same playbook that we had in the US. And it completely failed. They blew about $50 million in 6 months. We didn't get any traction with the business or the products or services. And the reality was they didn't even know what online e-commerce was in Europe because the US was 2 or 3 years ahead. And so they weren't thinking about booking services online. They weren't thinking about booking travel online. And certainly our model was about naming your own price, which had some inherent risk to it. They weren't willing to take that kind of risk. So we retreated relatively quickly. The brand lived on there to some degree because of the investment, but it had very little business. So we backed out, retrenched, then 9/11 hits. We almost go out of business, like literally on the verge of shutting down the doors. Stock price goes to $2 a share. We're very humble, and most of the people leave. And the lead lawyer in the company at the time takes over as CEO because no one else wanted the job. So he takes it, and then 4 years later has built up enough of a cash pool to say, let's go out and find some businesses overseas. So we went to Europe and found a small, tiny, little growing hotel business called Booking.com. Booking.com today is the world's largest travel company in the world. It's part of Booking Holdings, which Priceline is a part of as well. They're now operating in over 220 countries. Priceline operates in a handful of countries. They operate in over 220. So the question is, what did they do right that we didn't do right? And a couple of things. One, they were a little later to market, right? They trailed us by 3 or 4 years before they started the business. So consumers were at least used to booking things online in the market. So that was one. Two, they came in with a product that was much more congenial for the Europeans. It had very little risk. You could book your hotel and then pay when you checked in. And they did it country by country by country. And some of the things that they looked for in countries were, one, was there enough consumer demand coming through Google to signify that there were literally travelers looking to book something online. And so they waited for that signal. That was the first signal. And number two, they wouldn't enter a market until they had enough actual hotel inventory to make the advertising worth the spend. That's a common mistake a lot of companies make. You go in too hot with the marketing before you actually have enough product on the shelf or online to make it worth the while for the consumer. So they would build up the inventory in the local market by deploying salespeople to contact hotels, load the hotels up on the site, and when they felt ready, they would begin to engage in Google and start to run online advertising. That was like stage one. Once they seeded themselves, they would then go upper funnel with their advertising. So that's at the very bottom of the funnel. People have shown intent through Google, then they go up a level and start to do slightly lesser intent, and then they would go in with brand advertising once they had some footing in the marketplace. And they replicated that country after country after country all over the world, except for China. That was a very different country, and Japan to some extent. And we can talk about that a little bit later on today if we want to, but those two markets in particular are so different from every American North and South and every European country in the world that really required a completely top to bottom different approach with how we went into that marketplace.
That's really interesting. So you acquired Bookings.com, and you watched them enter into all of these new markets. I'm curious, what was the partnership along the way as you're seeing their success and they're expanding? Was there any sort of collaboration from a market perspective? Is this a partner that you followed into certain markets and not others?
Yeah, so as a group, we had great leadership, and they clearly saw the success in the model that they were rolling out. But at the same time, Priceline needed to grow, and so we were growing quite quickly here in North America. We did some business overseas in Europe, but mostly in English-speaking markets. And really, the benefit of this was, and the company made some incentives internally to collaborate more efficiently, they were acquiring hotel inventory all over the world. And essentially, they gave us all of that inventory so that we could put that on Priceline's platform as well. And then vice versa, we gave them all of our US inventory. And so in return, we basically made each other stronger on a worldwide platform to the point where we had more hotels on our platform than anyone in the world. So if you came to us, you could not find a hotel anywhere that we did not have. And so that strength, it made us both friends and really intense competitors. And so within our companies, we had individual brand leaders, brand P&Ls, the whole thing, and we competed against each other. And the way that you determine who spends what money in what markets is we really just leaned on what the ROI of the spend of the return was. So if you could make your dollar work in the market, you could play in the market. If you couldn't, you backed out because you were essentially losing money on behalf of the group.
Day by day, variable investment, track return, and double down where it's working.
Exactly.
Interesting. Let's talk a little about customer experience. And this is, you've both referenced how markets work differently. You talked about cultural distance, and as we step back and think about the world through our own lens as consumers, we are very refined consumers. It's a competitive marketplace. We know what we like. We know what we're looking for, and yet it's easy to believe that we can take the product that we built and the way that we present it to a consumer and try and replicate that in other markets. Markets are so different. Culture is so different. How did you think about taking your brand to a new market, but really understanding how the customer experience expectation may be different in that market?
Yeah, even some of the consumer demographics that we were focused on will be different. So, I mean, like, simply assuming that we called our core, like our golden consumer target, if you will, the change maker here. And it was like, it's like, call it 30 million people, 10% of the population, roughly. And they have a bunch of psychographic and demographic similarities within that group that we felt was a really great golden target. If we hit that and we nail our marketing message and refine our product to meet that consumer, it'll halo out to a much bigger group, and then we can kind of expand from there. That consumer market, that consumer target, not the same in China or Japan. And so, what we tried to do the best we could, which we did do pretty well in most cases, was set brand guidelines that were pretty high level so that it would feel familiar to you if you saw an ad in Japan for us, that it was an Allbirds ad and it wasn't like jarring to you. And yet it was localized enough such that it really resonated with the right consumer target in Japan and also met the cultural norms, consumption patterns, and would resonate with them in a way, styling, model selection, like all that really detailed stuff that matters quite a lot when you're putting ads in my industry, at least. That stuff is pretty critical. And so being thoughtful about what level you set the guidelines at, and if you reduce that level and make it too fine a granularity, you're telling people what to do, and it's going to fail miserably, and you're increasing the bureaucracy, like centralizing all the decision making, and it's destined to fail. So that puts the burden on hiring incredible people on the ground. And so that is what we tended to focus on, was high-level, low-granularity guidelines and get amazing marketers on the ground. That was our number one focus when we hired internationally, because that's the hardest thing to get right. And frankly, with our industry, it's a very, you can't do too much change to the product for global needs in the footwear industry. It's just too hard, too expensive. Even the biggest companies in the world don't do it, really. So the marketing is what's essential, and those are the two things that we kind of leaned on to get it right.
So when you say high level, more qualitative, connected to people who lived in those markets, you weren't going into markets and doing segmentation in each market to like quantitatively understand consumers. You felt like
we would let the people on the ground do that.
You would, okay.
They go do that work, and when I say like higher level, I just mean lower fidelity. So it's guidelines that it's still going to look like an Allbirds ad, Japan to US, but it won't be like cuff the pants here. The lady that you're casting for the modeling has to be Japanese with this kind of aesthetic and, blah, 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 blah. Like
Right.
You would never do that. It would fail miserably. So it's just the level of fidelity is really important, and then hiring very smart marketers and acknowledging that if marketing is going to be the thing that's going to be the most changing and fluid and dynamic and the most important to get it right with that consumer, focus your best hiring and all your dollars and resources on getting the best people in that functional area and worry less about the other stuff.
Mm. What about a Priceline? Brett, you talked about your experience going into the UK initially, and product market fit wasn't quite there. They didn't have the same response to your product, your business model that you'd experienced in the US. How do you think about customer experience? And you've had a ton of experiences in different markets since then, market by market. How do you get close enough to the consumer to know how they behave differently?
The travel space is interesting because in most markets in the world, generally the same user interface works pretty well. So we didn't have to go in and do highly differentiated user experiences in each market. But there are tells that a local can see in your UX, your user experience, the website experience, if they come in to use you. For example, if you're in the UK and you're using periods instead of commas, right, for decimals, it's an obvious tell. If you're using obviously miles instead of kilometers, if you're using, there's just certain language tweaks that you can make. But the user experience, the general flow of shopping for a hotel or a flight or a car, going through the process of purchasing is generally the same. The differences are some of these small intricacies, and then, of course, payment methods. So if you're about to go launch in a European country, if you don't know what type of credit card and or other online banking, facility they're using to transact, you're going to fail miserably because you've got to be on market with what they use. Moving into markets in Asia is a completely different animal. Like Europe and the US, generally the UX works pretty well, the user experience, the product. As soon as we went into China, it was a complete failure because when you look at the homepage of a Chinese travel website or a Japanese travel website, it looks like a video game. It does not look like what we would consider, a typical user experience as you go in. And so we ended up trying again and again and again. And secondly, they don't use the same marketing vehicles that we use, right? They don't go to Google to shop for a hotel, right? They're on an app, right? This is the countries with the super apps. And so everything is done inside their app. And you had to figure out how to crack that market and advertise within these apps. So we hired teams locally in China and in Japan some years back to go build unique interfaces and do the whole thing. And it still just didn't really work that well. So we eventually kind of pulled out of China and then made some strategic investments in some very large travel companies who are ingrained local in the marketplace. And we learned more from them. We actually exchanged inventory where we got access to their inventory. They had access to our inventory. That worked for 3 or 4 years until we realized they were using that to back end us, meaning go to the hotels that they realized we had relationships with outside of China, negotiate behind our backs, get better discounts or deals, and then cut off the supply that we were giving them. And so essentially, they were choking us and then expanding outside of China. So if you go to China, good luck. It is a really difficult place to do business. And if you partner with someone in China, watch your back because they could be coming after your business. Well, they will be coming after your business. And so that's just the reality. That's how business is done. And so we learned to compete effectively in that market. The Japanese market, it's not quite a similar story, but a very hard market to crack. The rest of Southeast Asia and Asia, we've done pretty well in.
So China, complicated market. Didn't work when you went in for sort of go it alone approach. You partnered. It worked for a while. Did you go back after you'd learned from a partner? Is China a market that you still invest in, or?
Yeah, listen. If you look at the world travel market, the U.S. North American market's worth about $1 trillion in annual sales. The European market, all European countries combined, about $1 trillion. Asia is worth about $1 trillion, and probably 2/3 of that is from China. And we are not operating in China, really. We do almost no business in China. It's just, we basically pulled the plug and said, we're done. Because everything's against you. The government's against you, the companies are against you, and the consumer really likes local products. They don't like products coming in from outside of the country. That may be a generalization, but it's mostly true.
Particularly in technology.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, in my space.
Shoes are good, yeah.
We're there from a sourcing perspective. We don't sell there. It's Skull Candy we did, and it was a pretty good. It was a pretty good market for us until we saw brands that looked a lot like Skull Candy and spelled very similarly to Skull Candy, but 75% less. Now it's a complicated, challenging market. Again, it's like you can look at it from a distance and say, this is huge, but it's also messy. Brett, I want to shift a little bit. Technology, generative AI, the buzzword of the last couple of years. We talked a little bit about this. Few companies are really figuring out how to practically leverage Gen AI to create value in their businesses. What has been your experience at Priceline? Specifically, and then if you were to sort of step back and talk to, we're going to span a range of company sizes, startups to large multinationals. What are some of the practical principles or lessons that you might suggest as we're looking to implement?
Yeah, so we're extremely bullish and super excited about generative AI in particular. Our brands have used AI for a number of years to do all kinds of things, to sort the hotels that you see, to determine what the best personalized content is to show to you. But Gen AI has really changed the game, I think. And what's nice about the product is it's available to everybody. right? You don't have to hire 100 data scientists to deploy generative AI. You need a few smart people and a couple of engineers who just really want to dig in and learn this stuff. So we leaned in heavy. We launched Gen AI in March of last year, and since that time have significantly evolved it within the company. So the question is, what are we doing with it, and does it actually, benefit our consumers and our sales? And so we've strategically put it in a couple of places. One, we're using it in a similar fashion to other companies where we're using it to summarize guest reviews. So in one snippet, you can read 1,000 reviews. We're using it to craft hotel descriptions, and they're much better than a human written description. Normally, we rely on the Days Inn, in Casper, Wyoming, to write its own description, and it's terrible. And so we say, hey, Gen AI, read this description, all the reviews about the hotel and the area, and write a better description for us. Half a second later, a beautifully scripted description. We say, okay, now give it our voice. Done. Okay, I want to tweak it just a little bit, focus a little bit more on the exterior or the interior of the surroundings. Done. And so we can then deploy these and test these with consumers, and we determine which reviews or which descriptions and style of description is best suited for giving the consumers what they want. It's amazing. In the past, we used to think, well, how are we going to write new descriptions? We'd have to hire a team, in India, and they would write hundreds of reviews, per person per week, and we'd have to review them manually. We don't do any of that, right? You just pop it in the machine, it spits it out, and it's fantastic for as many hotels as we have. Literally 1 million properties that can do that overnight. So those are really interesting areas. But I think for us, the most interesting area that we have dived into, like all in, is in our chatbot, and her name's Penny. And Penny is in the early stages. She just had a 1-year birthday a couple of days ago, and I went online and I asked her, I said, so it's your birthday, how are you going to celebrate? And she says, we don't celebrate birthdays like you humans do, but I'm here just to give you a great deal. What can I do for you? I'm like, perfect response.
That's awesome.
So her job is to help you move through the transaction experience, right? So as you come onto our website, customers have questions literally from the home page, right? Like, where do I want to go? What do I want to do? What are some trending destinations? What if I want to ski or sail? Where should I go? But as you get further down the funnel of booking your hotel, then you start to look at the hotel and you really start to have questions. And we try to answer those for you with the content on the page, but the reality is we can't answer 90% of the questions people have. They're just too diverse. I mean, people are asking the most insane questions to our chatbot. Like, I've got 3 St. Bernards. Can I bring those to this hotel, right? Or
It's a reasonable question.
it's a very reasonable question. Can I do a barbecue out in the parking lot with my Traeger, right? Like, what can I do? And so we let her answer those, and she's really good at it, right? Because she obviously scans the world and scans all of our private content and then gives very good feedback. She's also fabulous and will be much more fabulous in the future at helping you with customer service. The most frustrating part of travel is something always goes wrong, right? And you need to cancel, change, rebook, complain, whatever it is. And so we're starting to connect all of our APIs to her. She'll do it for you. So today, she can do simple things like, hey, I just want to cancel this reservation. In literally 2 seconds, she'll say, are you sure? Yes, it's done. It's canceled. You've been refunded. Here's when you can expect your refund. Super simple things. So we're helping her to learn how to do more complicated tasks for you as a traveler. And we've just deployed voice, and we've given her her own personal voice. It's not Scarlett Johansson, but it is a great voice. And she now talks to you. We just rolled out their latest, OpenAI's latest 4.0, and the thing's amazing. It really is half the price and twice the speed, and you can now engage in conversation real time like a human. I mean, it's just mind-blowing how fast it's moving. And so any company, literally, who engages with consumers either online, on the phone, because that's our next step, is I don't want you talking to people anymore, not because it's going to save me money. She will be better than the humans who are taking those calls today. Because, I'm sorry, I'm almost done. Most phone agents today, right, are overseas. They have been working for your company for probably 6 to 9 months. They have probably never used your product, have never flown on an airplane, yet they're helping you rebook an airline ticket in a complicated transaction. She will be able to scan all of the conversations that have been had with customers, synthesize those down, pick the very best responses or steps, and do those for you as a consumer. It will change the way we do customer service.
It's incredible. Thank you for sharing that. I want to take a couple of questions, and while we're doing that, While you're thinking of your questions, what's the most important piece of business advice? It can be related to this topic or anything else that you would share with this group.
I would put it to this topic and any other topic is the importance, this is going to sound trite, but all these things are, so apologize, but the importance of focus. Basically everything we said, when we were doing a really good job, everything we said yes to, we said 99 no's to. So like that mantra for us was a very, very strong secret to success, and understanding that that one thing is going to lead to a really important outcome that matters more than lots of the other things that you might go after and get. So that to me is probably the most important thing in building a business, certainly small to bigger.
We're going to talk about this over dinner. I need some advice on focus, so hold that thought.
That's right.
Brett, yeah, not it's relative to Traeger. Go ahead.
So I'll just chat about people for a minute, since every one of your businesses rely on people, and our business is people and technology, and most of the people are building the technology. We really strive for authenticity in our company. So I try as the CEO to share everything with our employees, right? So they don't believe that there's a secret room where all the conversations are taking place about how we create the budget, how we create their bonuses, how things are done. I share it all with them. We have all hands every 2 weeks, and we're covering anything I can think of in the company that would be of interest to them. Because especially the younger employees today, they want to be engaged with you. They want to be tied to your brand. If you are holding things back, if they know you're not telling them the full story about what's going on, like tell them the good news and tell them the bad news. And we do that every time. That really goes a long way in creating, I think, great loyalty, commitment, and just, I think, a belief in your brand and the company. So that's my business advice.
Thank you, both. We'll take one question from the audience. As long as you own a Traeger or Allbirds, or you've booked on Priceline recently, go ahead.
Well, we're close. We've invested in the same company before, so there's that. I own a new boutique hotel that's locally owned, so I'm going to flip this question of the title. How do I stick out in a global market in owning a local brand, Maven Stay?
Is that for Brett or Joey? I'm just kidding.
That's for both of you.
Go ahead.
I would say that's probably closer to Brett's wheelhouse,
There we
but
go.
I think you both probably solved this problem.
Well, I don't know if this is what you want to hear, and it sounds very self-serving, but this is the reason why online travel agencies exist, because they expose smaller boutique hotels to consumers from all over the world. A company like Booking.com is bringing clients in from all over Europe to the US and to this market. And so if, one, get your property on there, two, make sure that you have spent the time to build out all of the content and features that you want displayed for your property. Be meticulous with that, because that really drives the conversion of your property as consumers come in and engage with it. And that's honestly my best advice, because that's what we do, is we bring consumers to properties that otherwise would have zero exposure overseas, because you just can't afford to advertise in those markets.
One thing I would just add, not specific to hotels, because I don't know much about them, but I think all business is local. So, I mean, when we expand to a city in the U.S., that's also an expansion for us. It's not, I mean, we have a national DTC digital site, but when we do a store, what we find is everything is local and all marketing is geographically important. That's what I found, at least. So I would say that investment in a very efficient way within the local community to get the people who are going to be ambassadors for you in the future would be something worthwhile.
Awesome. Thank you so much. You're kind to come out here, hop on a flight to do this, and super valuable wisdom. Thank you for sharing.
Yeah, thank you for being a great host. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you, John.